from the National Early Alert Center from Brazil, SEMAE, Osvaldo Luis Leal de Moraes. From SEDEMA, we have Elizabeth Riley, who is the Executive Deputy Director of also the Caribbean Agency, SEDEMA. We also have Onyx Arza, who is a social worker of the National Agency for Promotion and Citizen Participation of the National Secretariat of Disabled People in Panama, and the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Media Luna Roja Regional Director, Dr. Walter Cote. We will also generate spaces. First of all, we will listen to Dr. Ricardo Mena. Ricardo is a very well-known person regarding risk reduction and also risk reduction management. He is the chief of the support and monitoring of the implementation of the Sendai framework of the UN. And before taking office, Dr. Mena was chief director of Americas, where he has generated a lot of work. Also, he had an appointment in the UN having to do with the development program for nations as a coordinator of OCHA. He has also worked around strategies since 2009, as well as writing publications and articles related to this topic. He was the founder member of the Social Studies Prevention Network of Latin America. He has a master's in crisis and management crisis from the United Kingdom. Personally, as a Colombian and making part of this organization, to be able to listen to Dr. Ricardo Mena is really, I'm very pleased to listen to him, and I want to thank you because we always look together with him opportunity to organize this platform in Colombia, and he helped us to manage, and this is why we're here. This is your house. We open our arms. You are Ecuadorian, but I know that Colombia is your second country. So, Dr. Ricardo, I pass the floor to you so you are able to talk to us today. Good morning for all of you. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here in the region in order to participate in this regional platform for the disaster risk reduction. I'm very pleased also to be here in Colombia, and I thank Dr. Carlos Iván Márquez for your warm welcome. And particularly, it is very special for me to be here today with a different hat on without being concerned to the logistics of these types of events. So I feel in a more relaxed environment. I will start promptly, and it has been very important for me to give me a chance and maybe just put on the table some of the ideas regarding this very important topic, which is the main topic of this plenary session number 1, so that all the panel experts can also elaborate a little bit more around those issues and maybe be able to talk around them according to their own experience. I will start by mentioning, it's not new for us, where countries and communities are interconnected in a globalized way, in a world when at the same time we have a high risk level, which we confront on a daily basis. And also in a world where at every minute, I might say in every second, decisions are being made which are very important regarding the future of the planet, and our own decisions are being taken that have to do with the use of natural resources or the public investments in schools, hospitals, roads, bridges, airports, infrastructure works as a hydroelectric power station, but also more simple decisions. That sometimes are undertaking situations that have potential risk situations. And these decisions have to be taken whether there is enough information or not in order to make a risk assessment, since this decision can also have other issues around it. So that is why, for example, if we decide to build a hospital within a zone without performing a risk analysis, it maybe can occur, as we've seen, that there are hospitals built in flooding areas or in zones having a high seismic risk level, and due to the fact that they haven't followed a very proper risk analysis, end up having a vulnerable structure and, of course, can collapse before the occurrence of some threat. And we also have a more complex world nowadays, because since we adopted the Sendai framework, paragraph 15 specifically, we talk about the environment or the scope of application of this framework, which does not refer only to natural disasters or threats, but also to those which are created by men. And they have to do with biological, environmental, and technological. That is to say that we now have to think in a different field, in a field where we not only see how some can provoke cascade effects, which also lead to the others. Examples as such are, for example, the earthquake in Japan, which generated not only one earthquake, but also a tsunami, and also a structural failure in a nuclear station, which led to the results we all know. To ignore the risk assessment can also be dangerous. We have some examples in the region. For example, Haiti, during several years, ignored the existence of high seismic risk, and it only focused towards the risk of hydrometeorological risks as hurricanes, storms, and high-level water sources. And that had, obviously, it hindered Haiti to develop, because that earthquake generated enormous destruction as well as a large death toll where the country has not recovered yet from. So, allow me to briefly mention that the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction has the perfect structure for countries to be able to take on the assessment of risk in an efficient way that brings about an impact on the reduction of risk. For example, I would refer here to priority 1 in the Sendai framework that has to do with the need of better understanding risk.
¿Cómo se comprende mejor el riesgo? Analizándolo en todas sus variables, tanto desde el punto de vista de la amenaza como de la exposición, de la vulnerabilidad y de las capacidades. Entonces, esto es un primer elemento fundamental. Y el marco de Sendai determina ya cuál es el plan también para poder avanzar con un mejor entendimiento del riesgo que debe alimentar el proceso de toma de decisiones de las que yo les hablaba hace un momento, de esas decisiones que se están tomando cada segundo, cada minuto, cada día, y que los políticos particularmente las toman, tengan o no información sobre el
whether or
riesgo.
not they have
Entonces,
information on risk.
tenemos que estar muy conscientes de esto.
So we need to
Y esto
be
se
very
vincula
aware of
también
this.
muy
And
estrechamente
this is also
con
closely
la
related
meta
to
meta
Target
global
E,
del marco
the
de Sendai,
global
que tiene
target E
que
from the
ver
Sendai
con
framework that has
el
to do
incrementar
with
el acceso
increasing
y la
access
disponibilidad
and
de
availability
estrategias de reducción de
of
riesgo de desastres a
strategies
nivel
for the
nacional
reduction
y local.
of
Y una de las cosas que
risks and
menciona con respecto a las
disasters at a local and
estrategias del
regional way.
marco
One
de
of the things that it
Sendai
mentions with regard
es que
to the Sendai
justamente esas
framework is
estrategias
that
lo
risk
más
assessment,
comprensiva posible.
and one that is as
Entonces
complete and
volvemos,
comprehensive
si
as
es que
possible.
nuestras estrategias de reducción de
So
riesgo de
again,
desastres no
if
están
our strategies
integrando
for the disaster risk reduction are not
relacionados con la
including aspects
evaluación
that have
del
to do
riesgo,
with risk
no
assessment,
van a ser suficientemente
they will
efectivas
not be
al momento
sufficiently
de reducir
effective
el riesgo
when the time
de
comes to
desastres.
reducing
Tema sumamente
the risk
importante. Ahora,
of disaster. So this is a very
existen una
important aspect.
infinidad de formas de hacer evaluación de
There are
riesgo
myriad
y
ways
pueden
to
ser
assess
desde muy
risk,
simples,
and these range from
analizando
very
la
simple,
probabilidad de
assessing the
ocurrencia de un
likelihood of
evento y
occurrence
la
of an
probabilidad de
event and the
impacto,
likelihood
haciendo una
of
priorización
impact,
y seleccionando
prioritizing and
pues, las que tienen
selecting
mayor
those that
posibilidad de
have a
impacto y
higher
mayor
likelihood
posibilidad
of
de
impact and a
ocurrencia.
likelier
Sin embargo,
and a higher
existen
likelier
también
occurrence.
tanto
However, there are also
evaluaciones de riesgo determinísticas o
both
probabilísticas
deterministic or
que permiten
probabilistic
definir con más
assessments that
exactitud
allow you to identify
cuáles
with greater
son
precision
los
which
parámetros
are
que deben
the
llevar
parameters
a una acción
that
en
should
términos de
bring about an
métricas de
action
riesgo.
with regards to
Muchos de
risk
ustedes habrán
metrics.
oído de las
Many of you have
pérdidas
heard, no
anuales
doubt, of
probables
the
o de las
probable
pérdidas
annual
máximas
losses or
posibles,
the
que
maximum
son conceptos que
possible
no
losses.
todos las
These are
manejan
concepts that
y que sin
maybe not
embargo
all
son
are
muy
familiar with,
importantes a la
but
hora de la toma de decisiones,
nonetheless,
sobre
these are
todo
very important when
con
the time
respecto a
comes
las
for
potenciales
making
pérdidas
decisions,
económicas
especially
que
with
pueden
regard to the
provocar los
potential
desastres.
economic losses that can
Es un tema obviamente
be
que da
the
para
result of natural
muchísimo,
disasters.
para
This is a
mucha tela que
subject that
cortar.
we could
Lo que
speak
yo
on
quiero
for
es,
a very long time.
también
But what I
mencionarles
would
un
like to
poco
do
qué
is also
estamos
mention
haciendo nosotros
what
en
we
Naciones
are
Unidas
doing
para tratar de abordar
in the
este
UN
tema y tratar de
to
ofrecer
discuss this matter and to
una
strive to offer
plataforma
and provide a
que
platform
permita que los países, tanto para el nivel nacional como
so
para
that
el nivel
countries,
local,
both at a national and local
cuenten
level,
con
have
información
information
que sea lo más científica
that
posible
is as
y lo más
scientific
precisa
and precise
para
as
que
possible
pueda informar
so that
los procesos de toma de decisión desde el
it
punto
can
de vista del
inform
riesgo de
decision-making
desastres.
processes from the
Entonces,
perspective
muy
of the risk
rápidamente,
of disasters.
estos son
So,
temas que ya he cubierto,
these are subjects that I've already discussed, so I'll go over them very quickly. But
este es
this
nuestra
is
propuesta que
our
estamos ahora
proposal
trabajando
that
desde
we
el
are
año
now
pasado
working on
con
since
una
last year
consulta de expertos
with
en
a
evaluación de riesgo de
expert
desastres
advisory group
y
on the
que
subject
pretende
of
generar
the risk of
esta
disasters.
plataforma o este marco
And the purpose is to create
que
this
permita
platform or this
acceso a
framework
información
that will
sobre
provide
la
access to
evaluación del
information
riesgo
on the
que permita
assessment of risk
mejorar esta
that will
toma de
allow us to
decisiones
improve
sensible al riesgo de desastres.
decisions
Y
made
lo que es importante es que
related to
primero
disasters.
tiene que haber una
And what is key is that,
un acuerdo con
first of
respecto
all,
a
there
cuáles
needs to be
van
an
a ser
agreement
las
with
métricas
regard
que se
to
van a
what
utilizar
metrics will be used
para evaluar el riesgo.
to assess risk.
En segundo, tenemos que tener
In
claro
second
quiénes
place, we
son
must
los
need to be
grupos de
clear on
usuarios a los
who,
cuales tenemos que
what groups of
apuntar
users we
para que
need
esta
to focus
información
on
pueda
so
estar a
that
su
this
disposición.
information can be
Son
available
claros,
to
son
them.
muchos grupos, tienen que ver
And
con organismos
there are many groups that have to do with
internacionales, obviamente con
international
gobiernos,
organizations
tanto a
and, of
nivel
course, with
nacional como a
governments,
nivel
both at a
subnacional,
national level as well
con
as a
gobiernos
subnational level,
locales,
with local
pero tienen
governments.
también que ver
But
con
it
la
also has to
industria
do
de seguros, por ejemplo,
with the insurance
tiene que ver con la
sector,
ciencia y la
for example,
academia,
has to do with
tiene
science
que
and
ver con los
academia, and it has to do
inversionistas,
with
en
investors.
definitiva, todo el universo de personas,
It has to do with the entire universe of
públicas
persons
y
and
privadas que
institutions,
toman
both public
decisiones
and
que
private, that make
llevan
decisions
consigo
that
la
have
variable riesgo.
a risk variable
Y
involved.
los, digamos, los insumos que permiten
And the
alimentar
inputs that allow us
esta
to
plataforma
feed into
son
this
los
platform
insumos que vienen tanto
are
de la
inputs
ciencia y
that
de la
come
academia,
both from
pero también
science
del
and
sector
academia,
privado
as well as from the
y
private
otros.
sector
Los
and others.
productos
And the
son
products
productos que puedan ser utilizados
are products
en sus
for
respectivas
users
geografías. Y
in
un tema muy
their
importante es que
corresponding
tienen que
geographies. And an
definir
important aspect
correlaciones y
is that they need
dependencias,
to determine
tiene que también
correlations,
ser coherente y
and
establecer
it
los
must also be
vínculos entre
coherent and
unas y otras,
establish the
tiene que ser
connections or links
fundamentada en un,
between them. present to you the complexity of the current world, what is involved in making decisions that are sensitive to risk, and what we are presenting as a solution for building in a joint manner. But my time is up, so I will be respectful to my fellow panelists, and I'd like to thank you for your time and attention.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ricardo. I would like to say that the next panelists will have 8 minutes each. And you have a sheet before you in order to, and that way the questions that we don't have time to answer here, we, as an organization, commit to ensure that you receive the answers after consulting with the panelists that you have directed the question to. Now I'm going to hand the floor over to Mr. Dan Kaniski, who will provide guidance on how risk assessment and learning from previous disasters and strategic planning can set the path forward for greater resilience. He is the Deputy Manager from FEMA. He is currently the second in rank at FEMA. Previously, he was the Vice President of Global Resilience. Additionally, he has provided consulting on issues that have to do with risk modeling and catastrophe modeling. He was also working on national and cybersecurity and worked as the Director of the Mission of Resilience and Preparedness for disaster response at a center that provides support to the Security Department of the United States. During George Bush's administration, he was a special advisor for national security, and he has prepared to answer 2 medical emergencies. He studied at the George Washington University, and he has a master's in international security, and he has a doctorate degree in public policy from the George Washington University. You have 8 minutes. Welcome. You can begin.
Dr. Marquez. I'm very glad to be part of this regional platform meeting on this panel allied such distinguished colleagues. Thank you also to our gracious hosts in the Government of Colombia, the City of Cartagena, UNISDR, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to speak about what FEMA learned from the 2017 hurricane season and our way forward in our priorities for the future, including risk assessment and resilience. There's perhaps no better context in which to discuss these topics than the regional platform. We recognize that the United States was not alone in facing the challenges of the 2017 hurricane season, and that many of you in this room have friends, family, or loved ones who were affected by disasters in common in this hemisphere. FEMA is committed to learning from our international counterparts and working together to reduce disaster risk. In fact, I learned a year for FEMA. Consider some of the records set from Hurricane Maria alone. It was the longest sustained air mission of food and water in FEMA history. It was the largest air and sea mission in FEMA history. It was the largest commodity mission in FEMA history. It was the largest medical response ever in the U.S. with our partners from the Department of Health and Human Services. And it was the largest power restoration mission on U.S. soil in partnership with our partners from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, FEMA recently conducted an after-action review of our efforts during the 2017 season. Along with input received from many of our partners, this after-action process is driving change at the agency and helps shape our strategic priorities going forward, many of which align with priorities 1 and 2 of the Sendai framework. I'd like to highlight a couple of themes from that after-action review today. Number 1, logistics. While each disaster had its own logistical challenges, Puerto Rico was particularly complex. Remember, Puerto Rico is 1,000 miles from the U.S. mainland, and the scale and duration of life-saving and sustainment operation showed that FEMA must be ready to support logistics missions that could span weeks or months, particularly in remote areas where goods and equipment must be moved by air and sea. Plans and procedures for resource management, transportation logistics, including last-mile delivery, must be effectively coordinated with other governments, both agencies and nonprofit organizations, and the private sector. Number two, survivable communications. There were challenges with getting a clear picture of what was happening in the early stages of the response, particularly in Puerto Rico. The issue was exacerbated by the complete collapse of the island's communications infrastructure. So it was difficult for us to develop an understanding of the extent of damage and where help was needed. The private sector played a key role in restoring communications, including cell towers and allowing open roaming for those cellular phones. Number three, adapting to long-term infrastructure outages. Too often, we assume the loss of power, communications, and water infrastructure following disasters will be limited in duration. But the extreme degradation of critical infrastructure in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands created many challenges, and we now realize we must be prepared for long-term encourage investment in resilient and redundant assets to maintain communications and temporarily supply power. Now, moving forward, we will use these lessons, and frankly, they've already been embedded in our strategic plan, which was released just in March. It has three priorities. One, foster a culture of preparedness. Two, ready the nation for catastrophic disasters. And three, reducing the complexity of FEMA programs. Now, this is available on our website, FEMA.gov. You can just Google FEMA Strategic Plan, and you'll get all of these details. Those three priorities, as well as sub-objectives associated with each of those priorities. Now, FEMA Strategic Plan aligns well with the Sendai Framework's priorities for action. So let me go through a couple of these. Number one, culture of preparedness. First, we need to acknowledge that during a disaster, individuals in the impacted areas are the ones that are actually the first responders. We need to empower those individuals with life-saving skills to help speed response and recovery efforts. For example, do they know how to shut off the water and gas? Do they know to check on their neighbors? Do they know CPR? But we also need citizens to be financially prepared, and this includes insurance. FEMA is very focused on closing the insurance gap, which is the difference between what is currently insured and what's insurable. Frankly, there is no more important or valuable disaster recovery tool than insurance, and we need to dramatically increase coverage to close this gap. We aim to transfer risk from individuals and governments to private insurance and reinsurance markets, both through public education as well as innovative programs. And we must use every tool at every level to shift this paradigm. This includes about how we communicate about risk, because what we're doing today is not working. We need to make the case that individuals can't afford not to have insurance. We also need to build more resilient communities to reduce risks to people, property, and taxpayers' dollars. Developing resilient communities ahead of an incident reduces loss of life and economic disruption. As the Sendai Framework upholds, when communities are impacted, they should focus on rebuilding infrastructure smarter and more resilient to reduce risks of damages, protect taxpayer dollars, and promote economic stability. The National Institute of Building Sciences in the United States recently released a study that found, on average, for every $1 that the federal government spends on mitigation grants, it saves the taxpayer $6 when a disaster occurs. So that 1 to 6, previously it was 1 to 4. So we're getting even stronger return on investment for those mitigation dollars. Now, that second priority was readying the nation for catastrophic disasters. Of course, if we're more prepared as a nation, we can focus more of our efforts on these actual catastrophic disasters. In other words, FEMA, and in the United States, we face many small disasters that FEMA is involved in. Going forward, FEMA plans to be more focused on the catastrophic. We can't continue to plan, train, and exercise for what's easy, though. We need to prepare for these catastrophic events that stress our logistics, supply chain, continuity of operations, communications, and staffing, just to name a few. And we need the American public to understand that FEMA is not a first responder. Number 3, reducing complexity. Finally, FEMA is committed to simplifying our recovery process and making FEMA's programs as clear and easy as possible for disaster survivors to navigate. We can't implement any of these priorities and initiatives without ensuring they meet the needs of survivors. Finally, I'd like to make a few comments along the lines of what Mr. Mano made on understanding risk. One of FEMA's roles is to help individuals, communities, and other organizations understand their risk. We have multiple programs that do this, but only by working together with our communities to help them understand their risk and help the federal government understand the risk can we come together to truly reduce those risks. In closing, we are committed to working with our partners to develop best practices to create a cycle of continuous improvement. I hope that we can continue to share our respective experiences and that we can all learn from each other to enhance progress towards making the Americas safer and more resilient. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
A very important focus towards having better resilience as part of the topics of today's forum. Is something which is very important and we have to convey to all of you is that once we're finished, we will provide some conclusions and obviously, we will refer to them in the special document we will draft. I will pass the floor now to Osvaldo Luis Leal de Moraes, who joins us from Brazil. And he will be talking to us about the experience and the progress in Brazil. Doctor is the director of the Early Warning and Monitoring Center in Brazil called ZEMAEN. He is also the associate professor of the Federal University of Santa Maria and scientific director of the Brazilian Society of Meteorology. He was the director of policies and programs and research and development of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation in Brazil, as well as the general coordinator of the Brazilian Center of Climate Studies from 2011 to 2013, besides being scientific director of the Support Foundation for Research of the Estado or the Rio Grande State. He coordinated the program of the postgraduate program in meteorology and physics of the Federal University of Santa Maria, and he was an external advisor of the Federal University of Rio Grande. Dr. Moraes also coordinated the CIT work group regarding to the BRICS program, and he graduated from the Universidad Rio Grande do Sur. We have the opportunity of listening to a very well-educated person from Brazil. I pass the floor to you, Doctor. Buenos días a todos. A usted, director, les voy a dar. Iba a hablarles en portugués, pero no, era un chiste nada más.
CEMADEN is a research institution from the Minister of Science and
Esta es
Technology.
una institución de ciencia y tecnología, el CEMADEN, y fue creado en el 2011, un año después de un desastre histórico en el estado de Río de Janeiro, que siguió con otro desastre en 2008.
I will briefly to describe what and how we do.
¿Qué ocurrió y cómo nos está yendo?
As a country of continental dimensions, you have disasters that are common in all Brazilian territory.
Y como lo pueden observar
I
en el
have
territorio
time.
brasileño.
The clock is not running.
Quisiera que me pusieran por
That's
favor
good
el
for me.
reloj que está frente a mí.
You have disasters that are common in our
Los
Brazilian
desastres
territory.
comunes
and the
en nuestro
disasters are
territorio
common
brasileño,
in a particular place of the Brazil.
particularmente en algunas partes de Brasil,
For example, in the south of Brazil, it's very common to have storms. Forest fires is common in the north part of Brazil. Landslides are common in the coastal zone. However, hydrological disasters are common in all territory of Brazil. This is a picture of the Brazilian Atlas of Natural Disaster. As in many tropical countries, drought is the disaster that by large, which affect most people. It's important to observe that it has impact on agriculture, water supply, navigation, irrigation, agriculture, and so on. But on the other side, mass movement that impacted less than 2% of the population, together with flash floods, accounts by more than 90% of the fatalities in Brazil. The mission of CEMADEM is to deliver warning related with flash floods and hydrological disasters. CEMADEM do not deal with other type of disaster. Of course, we also deliver information for the federal government about the impact of droughts. Then I can summarize that CEMADEM works with flash floods, hydrological disasters, and droughts. Other types of disasters are not related with our mission. This was the historical disaster in Rio de Janeiro state in 2011 with the pre-disaster moments. Until 2011, at least on federal government, all that Brazil has was action related with post-disaster. CEMADEM is, as I said before, is a center of science and technology. We try to understand which type of process is the tiger of disaster, how to combine observational data set and how to deliver with the proper times and with the proper terms the warning. How is the content that warning should have to be delivered to the society? However, it's true that CEMADEM works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But CEMADEM is more than one operational room. CEMADEM combines science, technology, communication, and education to deliver early warning and support for government decision. This is the conceptual structure of CEMADEM. We have one Department of Research and Development, one operational room, one information technology and engineer, and a huge network in Brazil. And since the beginning in 2011, more than 80,000 alerts were delivered to the society. However, I wanted to call attention for some numbers. Of course, we need to deliver and to do a good job as software and hardware. We need to have observational network, we need to have computers, we need to have models, but if you don't need people, you don't need nothing. CEMADEM has more than 100 technicians. 70% of these technicians has master or PhD degrees, even in the operational room. This is all our observational network. You have in Brazil near 6,000 hydrological gauges, rain gauges, meteorological radars, but together with the state centers, mainly for some states of Brazil, like Paraná, Santa Catarina, Ceará, Rio de Janeiro, we receive data set from these states in real time, combine these data sets with our observational network, and then the technicians can deliver the warnings. This is the number of the warnings delivered in 2017. More than 2,000 alerts were delivered. 48% of these hydrological alerts was for the mega cities and for large basin rivers. And the 52% is from geological aspects, mainly from the coastal zone. And this was the region where the disaster occurred in 2017. This is the number of alerts since the beginning. In the first column, you can see the number of municipalities that CEMADEM monitoring. There is one good observation between the very high alerts and the events that received this type of alerts. The correlation is not so good for moderate alerts. However, for moderate alerts, perhaps you don't have sufficient information. Many types of events with a small scale impact is not pointed for our system that has the information. Just to finish, I will call attention for one very important question. In general, hard science considers that hazard is the problem to deliver warning, but that is not true. Risk is not the only hazard. Risk involves vulnerability, protection capacity, and mitigation. To exemplify, this one meteorological warning for the National Meteorological Service in Brazil for November last year. It gives information that heavy rains in some part of north of São Paulo state, south of Minas Gerais state. It's necessary, but not sufficient, because event is not a disaster. Disaster is the impact. Look that in this part of the meteorological warning for the National Meteorological Service, there are more than 500 municipalities, but only 89 municipalities have areas of vulnerability mapped by the Brazilian Geological Service. In these 89 municipalities, there are more than 90,000 vulnerability areas, and 50% of the population living in these areas are of high risk of vulnerability. Just to exemplify, in the Belo Horizonte state, Belo Horizonte capital of the Minas Gerais state, there are very high persons living in these risky areas, 4,000 people living there. And this is the warning of CEMADEM for the same day, for the Belo Horizonte capital of Minas Gerais state. We describe how many persons and how many houses may be affected by the meteorological event. This just exemplify how is different of a meteorological warning of the natural disaster warning. Thanks a lot.
Bueno, muchas gracias, señor Osvaldo. Ahora me permito invitar a la señora Elizabeth Riley. Va a dar una ponencia sobre monitoreo, herramientas y experiencias desde la perspectiva de SEDEMA. La señora Elizabeth es directora ejecutiva adjunta de la Agencia Caribeña para el Manejo de Emergencias en Desastres. Tiene más de 18 años de experiencia en el área de la gestión de desastres y gestión ambiental. En SEDEMA tiene la responsabilidad general del la programación técnica y proporciona orientación estratégica en toda esta área. Ha escrito, presentado y publicado estudios técnicos sobre la gestión de desastres y gestión ambiental en su periodo adscrita a esta entidad, así como cuando colaboró con la Universidad de West Indies y el Ministerio de Desarrollo Físico y Medio Ambiente de Barbados. También ha dado conferencias en gestión de riesgos en varias universidades, tiene una maestría en economía en el medio ambiente de la Universidad de Manchester, de Reino Unido, así como una licenciatura en la Universidad de West Indies con honores. Tiene un certificado de maestría en sistemas de
Master's
información.
degree in information systems and monitoring based results from the Laval, Quebec University. Again, it's an honor for us to be able to listen to her. So we give the floor to you. Gracias.
Begin by expressing the thanks of the CEDIMA Coordinating Unit for the opportunity afforded by the organizers of the 6th Regional Platform to share some perspectives on this Sendai priority. The 2017 catastrophic impact of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in the Caribbean reiterated the need to understand risk and to base development decisions on evidence. For this reason, in the presentation today, I will touch on 4 topics to share a little bit on CEDIMA and our overarching strategy of comprehensive disaster management, which guides our work, to share with you some of the initiatives we have been undertaking with respect to evidence-based decision-making supported by our monitoring arrangement around the comprehensive disaster management strategy. I will also touch briefly on a few issues related to risk assessment and to make some recommendations for going forward. So CEDIMA is an arm of the Caribbean community. We have an extensive geographical remit as indicated on screen, which includes 18 participating states, which are quite diverse in terms of the types of hazards that they face. In terms of the remit of the agency, these are principally along the lines of 4 areas, ranging from the coordination of relief, advocating for disaster loss reduction and mitigation, an information clearinghouse function, and of course, supporting our states in strengthening their capacities. The CDM strategy is an all-hazard strategy, which speaks to all phases of the disaster management cycle. We emphasize a culture of safety, and we integrate our partners through strategic alliances and recognizing the importance of strengthening their own understanding of disaster risk issues. We seek to empower them to lead that dialogue within their particular jurisdictions. Within the CEDIMA participating states, the CDM strategy is our vehicle for the implementation of the Sendai framework. And it has been endorsed at the political level in our 18 participating states. We have identified overall 4 key result areas that we're working towards related to institutional strengthening, knowledge management, the mainstreaming of disaster risk issues at the sectoral level, and community resilience. There have been a number of tools that we've been working on over the past 2 years, looking at the first 2 years of the implementation of the current strategy, 2014 to 2016, and I wanted to share some of those with you. So we've been working closely with the UNISDR on the harmonization of the Sendai framework and CDM strategy indicators. We've also sought to make our monitoring process more efficient through the use of information and communication technologies with the establishment of the CDM monitor, and this allows for easier data entry, monitoring, analysis, as well as reporting. We have sought to address the area of the enabling framework through the articulation of a monitoring and evaluation and reporting policy, which has been agreed at the level of our council. At the national level, we have done quite a bit of investment in the articulation of country work programs, and these are results-based programs. And at both the national and regional level, we've emphasized the importance of articulating performance measurement frameworks. And we think that this is the way to go in terms of being able to report comprehensively. And this, of course, is all bolstered by training interventions in the area of monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. So to take a look at one of the specific indicators, because this demonstrates the extent to which we've been able to make progress in this whole area of evidence-based decision-making. So CDM Strategy Indicator 1.1.1, which speaks to the number of CDMA system stakeholders using performance monitoring frameworks and monitoring and evaluation processes to inform progress reports, is one of the areas we've been tracking over the past 2 years. And you will see from this slide, we would have started at a baseline of none of the participating states or the coordinating unit utilizing this type of mechanism. And in 2016, we are happy to report that we have seen some progress with 4 of these entities utilizing this type of mechanism. We do note, however, that this is a 40% achievement rate against the original target of 10 that had been set in 2014. But the important message is that we have been making some progress. With respect to the whole issue of risk assessment, I did look at one of the indicators that is identified within the strategy, and this one speaks specifically to the number of communities with hazard and vulnerability assessments that have been completed. And the finding from the 2016 interim assessment was inconclusive because there was insufficient data available to be able to make a statement on this. And I think this is instructive with respect to the issue of risk assessment and some of the challenges that we have been facing in the Caribbean, and in fact maybe a signal of some of the shortcomings in this area. What we do know, though, from previous studies is that in terms of risk assessment, the initiatives have been quite diverse. They've also been undertaken utilizing diverse methodologies. Most of them have focused on single or individual hazards, and there's been little consideration of sequential or cascading hazard scenarios, and this is an area where we need to put in some additional effort. Very importantly, though, is that what we're seeing is that there has been very limited use of the risk assessments that have been undertaken for the purposes of informing development decision-making. On this slide, I've highlighted some of the initiatives undertaken in some of our participating states, and you will notice that a range of hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment tools have been developed and applied in Guyana, Jamaica, and Suriname, for example, and it's only in the Virgin Islands that we could find specific evidence as to where this has been integrated into the planning process, and we think this is very positive. So in concluding, some of the considerations going forward. One, we think there's a need to strengthen the understanding of risk assessment, and this is at all levels. Additional research is going to be required to understand better the underlying drivers of risk within the context of our small island developing states, and to also understand the status of risk assessments as it currently pertains. We know that risk assessment is driven by data, and whilst there is a lot of data to be identified in the Caribbean region, access is usually an issue, and this can be addressed through policy-related issues and having a better enabling environment. And finally, with respect to the area of monitoring, there are 2 recommendations related to the importance of more strategic application of the reports emerging from the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting process, because we need to demonstrate how it can practically be applied to support decision-making, and of course, to strengthen capacities in those areas. Thank you very much.
Bueno, muchas gracias y felicitarlos por.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate you because you are complying with the 8 minutes of allotted time. And CDM DEMA can teach us a lot with regard to risk. You can tell the level, you can recognize the level of development that is a result of several years of work, such as regional coordination systems. Great. We have 2 speakers remaining. We're now going to hear from Ms. Onjit Arcia. Onjit Arcia, visiting us from Panama, with a presentation on tools for managing risks and disabilities. Good day to all of those present and to participants. I don't want to begin without first greeting the Office of the UN for Disaster Risk Reduction and the National Unit of Colombia for organizing this platform. On the subject of experiences and best practices, the National Secretariat of the Government of Panama has accepted with great responsibility the issue of risk management. If in the Americas there are more than 85 million people with disabilities, and if in Central America there are more than 3 million persons with disability, in Panama we have 370,000 persons with some kind of disability that corresponds to 11.3% of the population. As an office of the government responsible for the subject of disability, we had to work on managing risk. Our first step as experiences and good practices as a government institution was signing an agreement with the Ministry of Government of interinstitutional cooperation and reciprocal support. What is the importance of this experience for us as a government office? Although it's true that signing this agreement answers to objective number 2 of the Sendai framework with regard to governance, it allowed us as a country to continue guidelines and strategies that were set forth in target number 1 in the Sendai framework on the subject of knowing risk. By signing this pact, we were able to promote a risk management plan for persons with disability, so that the disabled population be prepared before, during, and after emergency situations. The National Secretariat for Disability, through subscribing this convention, allows us to be part of the national platform that manages security. We recognize the work done by the National Civil Protection System, and including the issue of disability. Additionally, we are part of the Emergency Operations Center, COE. We have a multidisciplinary team that is made up of a technical team, social workers, sign language interpreters, in order to be able to provide a response that needs to be multi-sectorial in emergency situations. In these photographs, you can see that we have been able to respond to situations of fires, floods, in areas of human settlements. This is one of our sign language interpreters present at the emergencies, such as the Otto hurricane in the year 2016. The Sendai framework indicates the importance of sharing and communicating information. As an institution, following up and complying this target, we have been able to disseminate through all traditional media outlets, including our websites that we're currently working on, and we're making it accessible to disabled persons. In order to understand risk, we, as an institution, have promoted the continuous training and creating awareness to government officials at all levels. Additionally, we have created awareness in disabled persons organizations, civil society, and security forces. For us, as a country, it's important to include disabled persons in risk management. They must be involved in the work that is done in this regard. As a country, we've also worked together with the National System for Civil Protection on the National Plan for Risk Management. And my time is running up. Our roadmap is one that we've worked on with a 5-year vision. It is focused on multi-sectorial work. We would like to thank the UN office because we were very honored that you have considered it as a good practice. But our road map was presented in August in the Commission for Human Rights in Geneva, Switzerland. This commission made certain considerations to our roadmap, and among others that we need to adopt an emergency plan for risk situations so that Panama might be able to answer to emergency situations with a multi-sectorial and inclusive approach. What are we working on as a country? We are working, first of all, on establishing guidelines that allow us to have much more inclusive answer systems and that are more adequate for disabled persons. We are working on making the corresponding adjustments to the existing protocols. Additionally, we are working on the recommendations made by the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, Switzerland. Our most relevant achievements as a country, first of all, would be signing the convention. It's important to include it in the risk management issue and the issue of inclusive governance. So signing this agreement was important. Developing and promoting our security plan for disabled persons is important. It's important for disabled persons to know how to safeguard their lives and know how they can prevent and be prepared for emergency situations, and recognize and include the participation of disabled persons in the entire process from its beginning. Our greatest challenge is to create in the Republic of Panama a culture of risk prevention, and especially that it be inclusive. This is my presentation with regard to best practices and experiences that we as a government institution have had when it comes to inclusion. Thank you very much, Ms. Arcia. Okay, very well. To conclude these presentations, I'd like to say that some of the logistics team are walking through the hall. If you have any question, please pass it to them so that we can organize the Q&A session. Very well. We are now going to welcome our friend, the Regional Director for the Americas of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, Walter Cott. He's from Colombia. He was born in Cali in the year, well, we'll tell you that later on. He has an experience in the Red Cross from Valle del Cauca. He has been the executive director, and he has created many processes for assistance and risk of disasters. After what was learned in Atamero, he set the framework of creating the 3000 series supporting the American Red Cross. As of today, all of these products are part of this order. He's currently located in Panama, and he is the regional director for the Americas of the International Federation. And he has been very involved in other subjects, other matters, such as what is known as today as cooperation for emergencies, the International Frontier Border Law. These are initiatives and borders that have arisen from the International Red Cross, and Colombia currently applies these mechanisms. Walter, the floor is yours, and you have 8 minutes so that you can please speak on experiences from a community perspective. Thank you very much, Dr. Carlos Ivan. Good day to all of you during this plenary session. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the government of Colombia, as well as the Risk Management Unit and the UN, through their strategy for disaster risk reduction, and Colombia and the people of Cartagena for welcoming us here, and to the members of the Red Cross throughout the entire continent. 150,000 volunteers in this continent in 35 national societies that are represented here today by approximately 130 people participating in this forum. 30 come from other countries, 16 in total. And with this, we are demonstrating our deep commitment to reducing risk in the north of the continent, in the Caribbean, in Central America, and in the south. The first thing I'd like to share with you on the information that we have, and we appreciate the possibility of working together with you. This is why what we desire is that the information that we have speak of things that fight against indifference, ignorance, and the lack of responsibility and solidarity with those who suffer. This is why we've strived to create a mechanism that we call the comprehensive information system that allows us to internally analyze ourselves, our capacities, our resources, and our possibilities, our operational possibilities, and developing a connection with other stakeholders at a local and international level. In other words, the information we seek to have points to the following. We have identified from our experience that extends many years in Colombia, in the Americas, and other continents, that from the perspective of those who do things or make decisions, those who don't know where they're headed are destined to get nowhere. And this is dangerous. And that's why when we want to progress, we need to be very well informed, democratize information, and ensure that things are systematized. And systematizing hurts. Having mechanisms that systematize hurts. Having mechanisms that show the truth hurts. We are very accustomed to giving figures and things that really are not confirmed and are not based on evidence, follow-up, and oversight. So what we seek to do in our internal process in the Federation, as well as in our relation with national organizations, is that, first of all, everything we do be confirmed with communities, with local systems, and with local stakeholders, and the institutions that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and at night. Here we see the importance of having this idea of democratizing information and making it advance through mechanisms that are organized, just as can be seen in this graph. What I'd like to highlight here is that we want to create our interactive, multi-purpose, multi-theme networks that recognize science and technology, but also traditional knowledge, that they recognize the abilities of communities of having their own experience. We've also begun to create dashboards and mechanisms that allow us to see with precision and in real time what we are doing in order to be able to inform ourselves and make the right decisions, as well as to inform our partners in a correct and permanent fashion, and also very clearly. This entails a great deal of opportunity. An integrated coordination system seeks to coordinate, revolutionize communications and the work we do, and ensure that everything that we do is confirmed in figures and in facts that can avoid unfounded fears. And these dashboards show our operational capacities and availability when it comes to the reduction of risk and resilience. It shows everything that we're doing and each country's abilities. Of course, these dashboards are not yet filled in. We're learning how to get baselines and information so that we can tell someone, you are well prepared, you have a emergency response as a country or a national unit, as well as to tell ourselves the Federation is prepared for X scenario. And this is very important to keep in mind from the perspective of information. But continuing with our process, it's worth noting that information also needs to produce intelligence and applicable solutions. We don't want to be part of paralyzing information. Information needs to activate capacities, activate people, activate positive energy to save lives, protect dignity, and above all to reduce risk and create resilient communities. Information needs to also be able to connect the community, to do what we call community engagement. Information needs to create credibility, synergy, contact. People need to be owners of their own destiny, and we want everyone to learn to manage this correctly. Information is good when it is based on people, when it's based on the events that take place in real places. This is why we have strived to create a mechanism where data is collected, information is collected, but we also want to take advantage of several different opportunities we have in the organization, using adapted and absorbable technology. And we've developed several models with support and experience of the 35 national societies and universities and partners. Specifically, I'd like to highlight the alliances with SEDEMA, CEPREDENAC, and many other local stakeholders. We are present in Panama, and there are five factors we'd like to highlight as part of our information mechanisms. Number one, we're working on creating a humanitarian hub in general. And in this humanitarian hub, these 5 factors are developed. And are our proposal from Panama to create regional networks that are efficient and based on adequate information. To conclude, I must also say that we have strived to use forecast-based financing. In other words, it's a forecast to be able to pay for things that can bring about adequate prevention on the very long term and make a real investment, as mentioned by the President of Colombia this morning. We are committed to the humanitarian cause, but based on efficiency, pragmatism, and facts. We are very present in the Caribbean, but we also have key examples in South America, Central America, and the North. All of these examples we'd like to share with you. But what I want to say in closing is that which is regional is made up of thousands of small parts. The Red Cross is present in 90,000 places in the Americas. We want to be part of the construction of these parts in order to be able to create the great puzzle of risk management, one that is multi-thematic, public, private, and humanitarian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we will give the floor, or we will open the space for a Q&A session, acknowledging that obviously we have to take advantage of the explanations that each of the experts have given us today. Due to the fact that they generate very important factors or questions, always remembering that this exercise will be very useful in order to comply and to be able to follow up all the topics that I see here Ricardo very much interested by prioritizing or taking a while for priority number 1 in the Sendai framework and try to gather, as all of you said, the context issue and try to really focus it on pragmatic issues. I think the world is really undergoing that scenario, and it's important that the action taken should be as effective on the terrain or the issuer of each of the entities and mechanisms of the officers. And it should be having such a high quality contact at a local level as having good quality of those decision makers when they are sitting down in other scenarios to assess if the person who is on the field is making a good job, or maybe it's the moment to change the paradigm, and by saying that that analysis should pass maybe forward to a local community work to create an impact. Today we've talked about resilience, and resilience is measured at a local impact level, both in local stakeholders and the community through some mechanisms that have been given and that we will refer to later on regarding the different conclusions that we will have. So here I have 3 questions, and the first one comes from Sandra Castelblanco, and this question is for FEMA. It says, please provide the complete reference of the investment versus mitigation and investment. Again, please provide us the reference, the complete reference of investment versus mitigation in dollars. So again, mitigation is $1 and response $6. If you could repeat that number, please, again for us.
Of course, thank you.
Claro que sí.
Again, it's the National Institute for Building Sciences said that in the United States, for every $1 the United States government provides to our subnational governments, to our state and local governments, it saves $6 should a disaster occur. Now, that is a very recent study. It came out a couple of months ago. It updates a previous study from 2005 that had a lower return. $1 invested saves $4. So the new number is $1. Is $1 invested now will save $6 later.
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Ramón Gabriele Padilla asks, from your experience or standpoint, how has been the disaster risk reduction management with disabled people from the vulnerable state in each community? And he wants to know the methods used. And this is for Mrs. Arce. Well, since 2010, Senadis had an investment or an expense in recovery of $149 million due to a low pressure situation in the country where the people, disabled people, were affected. From our standpoint and experiences, the important factor is to include disabled people from the beginning of the processes. First, for them to be prepared, and as the sustainable, the ODS 2010-2030, and to reduce the number of fatalities. And number 2, for us, in order to be resilient and to mitigate in a speedier way and to maintain a recovery system too. And that is where we should include disabled people, and this would be key in order to include them in this inclusive framework. Thank you very much. Now for Ricardo.